Hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP. Now on FM at 93.3. Usually at this part I tell you that, thank you, good to see you too. Usually at this part I tell you, hey, there's 34 days until the election, which is true. You know, we're going to talk about the VP debate and all that means. But if you go to my first guest website, theroarpack.com, they're a little more precise. According to Raven Harrison's website, it is 33 days, 12 hours, 54 minutes until the election. Raven, welcome back to the big show. Good to have you on. Your thoughts on last night's VP debate?
I thought it was underwhelming. It was civil by all means, but it was still a 3-on-1 contest, and I really felt like Vance was very polished, but he didn't deliver the kill stroke that many of us were wanting. That we felt like a lot of things were allowed to slide, and I just feel like we're going to have to really tighten this up before the election.
So what do you think the independent, non-decided, on-the-fence voters came away with?
I think that this was a good debate for them because the MAGA are already on board, and I think he had a little bit different tone. He had a little bit more of a middle of the road, which hopefully appealed to some of the ones who are on the fence. But I don't feel like it swayed. I know some people were disappointed, but again, the bar was so low for Tim Walz that he pretty much could have just stepped over it. So I think anything short of him just kind of melting down or doing kicks and fairy cartwheels or something like that, like he's a rocket, was pretty much a win for the Democrats.
Well, I think that J.D. Vance needs to get a little bit of credit for not coming away with they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats moment. Whether or not that's correct or not, just the fact that you gave them the ammo to go wave in front of uncommitted voters who didn't actually watch the debate and see it in context, so just see it as an object of ridicule. I think he did good in not giving them any material to work with.
Well, correct. And again, that's where the polish comes in. But I really feel like what is important is you can still hold that polish and mention, Walz is talking about democracy when you're literally running with a candidate who was not elected, who received no primary votes. That's the kind of stuff we had to be talking about, that it was just we're in three wars. And at that moment, when North Carolina is underwater, Kamala's at a fundraiser and Joe's at the beach. And just for context, James, right. I was in North Carolina, been trapped for 3 days. We just got out.
Oh, yeah, you were there. What a horrible coincidence.
It was absolutely awful. And then hearing people, Joe Biden's doing everything he can. Joe Biden's doing nothing. These people are starving, they are drowning, and they are arresting people who are trying to give aid. But Trump gave $25 million. He's on the ground, and Biden's going to fly over during his nap.
Well, my next question, Raven Harrison, are you friends with any school shooters?
No.
Because that's something we learned about Tim.
Not friends with any school shooters. My jaw pretty much dropped, and that's saying something while I was watching this last night. The rest of it was just trying to figure out why he looked stoned. I mean, his eyes were like deer in headlights. So I'm assuming it was nervousness, but he didn't address the stolen valor. He didn't address many of the other things that should have been the fact that Kamala let all these people in. I really felt like he did not hammer him, and that looked like, to me, what Tim Walz was expecting. He was expecting to get drilled on the things that were indefensible.
Well, on the count of the moderators, I was surprised that he had even brought up the Hong Kong lie, because I wasn't aware that he had lied and said he was in China during the Beijing, or Tiananmen Square, I should say. So they brought that to my attention when they were giving him a chance to cover for it. And then that was the one time when they actually did a follow-up, like, bro, you didn't answer the question, and where they actually accidentally moderated for a second.
They chose a softball. That was something that you notice how they didn't push back. They didn't offer a fact check. They didn't do anything. We heard a lot of, well, Donald Trump says this, but we didn't hear Kamala says this.
Yes.
Or you said that. So they were really clear. And then he sat there and stammered and, well, okay, well, that's it. Because they didn't press him on that. They would have been halfway up, down Trump's throat the second he had gotten the first syllable out, if that had been reversed. And again, what about him carrying guns in Afghanistan? They're talking about the thing, with China, but let's just ask the question, James, how many school teachers can afford to make 60 trips to China? and he's currently under investigation.
See, what is the deal with that? I didn't know he had gone to China over and over and over. You said it was 60 trips because,
60 trips. And again, he is currently, not yesterday, today, under investigation for his ties to the CCP. But again, we're hearing, well, Trump's a felon. Well, what does that make Tim Walz? He let his city burn to the ground. His wife said she opened the windows because she liked the smell of burning tires. That is a family of freaks.
Yeah, I totally agree. But it makes a weird pattern here because as you go back in history, this repeats itself over and over. Bernie Sanders went to the Soviet Union for his honeymoon. Whee! What kind of fun is that? Before that, you had Bill Clinton.
Socialist fun.
Yeah, so Bill Clinton takes a trip to Moscow when it's still part of the Soviet Union when he's in college at Oxford, just for funsies. You have, Sean Penn goes to see Hugo Chavez. Jane Fonda goes with the Vietnamese communists. Like, what is their deal with just being in love with communism?
Because they don't have to live under it. It's great to be in love with it when other people are spending other people's money, but they don't have to live under the policies that the rest of us do. That's what you're looking at. We gave billions to Taiwan this week, and we gave nothing to Americans. But, Asheville is sitting on a huge lithium deposit, so it'll be interesting. It's interesting why people are getting arrested there and see what's really going on. But having been inside there, that's the most heartbreaking because Asheville, James, was solid blue before this. They vote Democrat, and they left Biden and Harris left you to twist. They said, we can't do any more, but yet they're sending billions out the door to Ukraine. So we just need to rename North Carolina Ukraine. Problem solved.
All right. Thank you very much. This is Raven Harrison. Find our website, theroarpack.com. And you have to put the in there. The Roar, like a lion roars, pack, PAC.com. Thank you, Raven.
Thanks, James.
I want to address a Facebook comment from Anna. She says, I'm on the fence with your show, but every time you play one of those stupid songs, I turn off the radio. Please stop. Don't you have something better to say than play a song? I think so. I think me talking and me going over the news of the day or doing, some bit or doing some joke is better than playing a song for the 14th time. But you don't see the messages I get, Anna. You don't understand, like, for every one person of you, in fact, you're the first person that said stop playing songs. I've gotten that's what I get the most of is because no one can find the Tampon Tim song anywhere else. I don't think it's on YouTube. People keep sending me other Tampon Tim songs. This isn't it. Well, I know it's not it. He didn't put it up. It's just a friend of mine who made it in Houston. So I'm with you, Anna. I'm with you. But I get a lot of requests for these things, and bro, I need all the listeners I can get. So if I have to lose one of you to keep 12 other people, I'm sorry. That's a brutal trade-off I think I have to make. Until I get in the first place, I can't. I'm not in a position to turn away anybody, Anna. And I hope I don't lose you for it. I hope you can understand and just grit your teeth and fight through it. And I edited down the Tampon Tim song, so it was only 1 minute. So calm down. Real quick, you guys on hold, stay with me. I'm going to go to you right after we play a little bit of this audio. JD Vance just stepped up to the mic here. He's in Michigan just a few hours after the vice presidential debate. He came out and gave some statements, and I wasn't going to play any of the audio for you, but guess what? He just started taking questions. Now, the reason why I think this is significant is no matter what he says now, you have observed I have two countdowns, or a countdown and a count up on this show. Right now, 34 days until the election is one number I'm keeping up with. Yes, that's important. Also, 73 days now since Kamala has been the nominee. No formal news conference. She's never done this. She hasn't done what JD Vance is doing right now. So just to give you an idea of this is what she's avoiding. How bad could it possibly be?
Hey, Senator. Craig Mauger from the Detroit News newspaper here. You were talking about your opposition to EV mandates. My question is, do you think the government should have any role in incentivizing, providing financial assistance to battery plants,
Can you pause
to electric vehicle plants?
Since when did Kermit the Frog get a job at a Michigan newspaper? Anyway, go ahead.
Michigan is poised to benefit from some of these investments. Will you allow those to go forward? Will you try to interfere with those? Thank you.
Well, look, I think there's certainly a role, and I believe this, I know Donald Trump believes this, in encouraging innovation, but there's a difference between promoting innovation and sending hundreds of billions of dollars to favored industries that make their products in China.
There you go. You can go and pause it. That's all you needed to hear. That's all you needed to hear. He's already done more to be accountable to the media and the American voters than the woman that's on the top of the other ticket. 800-288-9227. Patrick in Denton, you're on WBAP. Your thoughts on last night's VP debate?
Did anybody catch when he leaned over and pushed his earpiece back in his ear and then looked down like he was high, actually listening to his handlers?
Maybe. Yeah. How do you distinguish that between just scratching your ear? Because he's an old man and they got a bunch of hair in their ear and they're always scratching.
I mean that's good backstory, but and I also wish they would have asked him what a woman was after all the abortion talk.
Oh man, I am so with you. Why does it? That should be the first question at every debate, at every Supreme Court nomination hearing or confirmation hearing or anything. I so love that question right now, and it shouldn't be a big deal. Like 10 years ago, actually all of human history until about 10 years ago, that question was never asked because it was a no-brainer. Even in societies that were far more accepting and, for lack of a better term, homosexual than we are, they never thought men could have babies. This is such a new, weird phenomenon. It's a great litmus test. I totally agree. Thank you, Patrick.
I appreciate it.
Kevin in Fort Worth, you're next up on WBAP. Your thoughts on the debate last night?
I just think final statements, closing statements should be very strong and full of points. And he did not, Vance did not do enough, I don't think, to really close it. He should have totally hammered them about the border and how COVID affected everything, and they continued COVID by allowing all the freaking illegals to come across with God knows what for diseases,
Well, I felt both of them were very Hippocratic in the O sense of the word, where there's first do no harm. I think Waltz and J.D. Vance, this is the first time they've ever been on the big stage, and they both seem kind of downplaying it, just trying to keep it calm, and boring is better than angry. Boring is better than some guy who has a bad attitude. Boring is better than they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats.
Yeah, I get it. That was a very good opportunity right there, this close to the election, to get all those points out there of what all the extreme damage the Democrats have done, Kamala and Waltz.
Yeah, and Kevin, that's why I did the show yesterday where I was asking you, and just the cap uppercase you, that what questions would you ask in order to actually have an effect on this debate? And the guy before you had it, man. What if JV just turned to Tim Walz and says, "What's a woman? Define woman." That would have been great. I would like to see him say, "What's John 3:16?" or just name any line from the Constitution. Or anyway, all good points.
It was an opportunity, and we needed to hit him harder on that final closing statement.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like that. Thank you for sharing.
You bet, thank you.
It seems like it would be so easy to do it, too. Your thoughts, 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. The most powerful part of last night's debate, I think, were the things that were left unsaid. My next guest, Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith from the National Police Association. Did you know defund? The word defund was not in last night's VP debate. That means they weren't any talk about defunding any federal programs or whatnot, but also no talk about defunding the police. Oh, that was so important just a few years ago. I can't believe that didn't come up.
Well, I'll tell you what, J.D. Vance did a good job, and he's an attorney. He understands the importance of the criminal justice system, and he brought up many times during the debate, let's let the police do their jobs. And I was so grateful to hear that. And you're right. It was great not to hear, because that's what we heard 4 years ago. It was great not to hear the American law enforcement officer being vilified, being demonized. We heard nothing about the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act and things like that.
Well, I think
fantastic.
I think you and I need to be pretty optimistic about it, because it tells you just how unpopular those ideas turned out to be after they've been run through the mill for 4 years. Didn't even get a mention, Betsy.
Well, you're absolutely right, because what we're seeing now is, we keep being told that crime is down, but we know the reality of it. Crime is not being reported. And so J.D. Vance, again, brought this up multiple times, that we need to be able to arrest people. We need to prosecute them, and that's been the missing piece for the last 4 years. We need to prosecute people that commit crimes, and then they need to do some time if they did a crime that deserves some time. We are seeing too many criminals in this country who don't really get punished for the aberrant behavior.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as a law enforcement professional, your reaction just overall to the debate?
Well, I thought it was, it was interesting to watch. The National Police Association doesn't get into candidates, but I was really heartened to hear that we needed to talk more about criminal justice, that both candidates were actually talking about that, and that there wasn't this vilification of cops. I mean, I think we've all got to go back to 4 years ago where there was just so much talk about the police are bad. Remember, the then vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, kept telling people that if you have less cops, you will have less crime. She likened ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement,
right,
to the KKK. The American law enforcement officer 4 years ago during the debates, we took multiple kicks in the teeth. Fast forward to last night. And I think you saw respect for the American law enforcement officer, especially from J.D. Vance. And again, a call to let us do our jobs and keep people safe.
We also didn't get any questions about that report that came out last Friday, I think it was, about all of the 13,000 convicted homicide suspects that we have roaming from the illegal population, 15,000 sexual assault convicts just roaming around in America with illegal status. Didn't come up once.
662,000 non-citizens in this country with criminal histories are on the national removal docket. That means 750,000 people almost ICE is trying to remove, and that includes those 13,000 convicted of homicide, 15,000 with drug offenses, 14,000 burglars, and 16,000 with sexual assault convictions. They're running around our country. ICE is trying to remove them, but, of course, they're short-staffed, and they're fighting the sanctuary city and sanctuary county policies all around this nation.
Tell them about the National Police Association.
Hey, go to nationalpolice.org. See all the great stuff that we're doing and all the great legislation that we are supporting. If you can't hit that donate button, James, because we need everybody's help.
There she is, Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith on the James Show again, National Police Association. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so now you've heard from a spokesman from a law enforcement advocate. You've heard from me. You heard from Raven Harrison. I want to hear from you, your thoughts on the debate. I know I had a couple callers. We've heard from you, too. But keep it coming in. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227, because coming up next, you and I are both going to answer the question, what was not in the debate? And when you hear about the list that I have compiled about things that are not in the debate, you'll almost ask, what the hell was the point of the debate? Exactly. The biggest issues of the day were barely touched in this debate, and I'll explain next. We got 34 days until the election, 73 days since Kamala's been the nominee, no informal news conference. Also, the James Show will be live from the State Fair of Texas coming up on Friday. Yeah, that's right. State Fair of Texas and the James Show are made for each other. I'm a big fan of them. I assume they're a big fan of me. So if you're going to be out there Friday anyway, come on out. Say hi. I'll talk to you on the break, take pictures, whatever. But if you want to jump in on the conversation now, the question is your thoughts on the vice presidential debate and what would you have liked to have seen added, basically, to the presidential debate? Because when you hear my list, it's going to floor you. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. So, I don't want to say the big debate was last night. The little debate was last night. The sidekicks got together and had what was, I think we're going to forget all about this in about a week or so. But really the effective debate, the final verdict is going to come with the polling that's going to happen over the next few days. I would like to hear your response, 800-288-9227. Because one of the things I want to ask you is, what wasn't in the debate? Because that's also kind of like what I was asking yesterday. What would you like to be asked in the debate? So a lot of you had your questions asked, but a lot of you didn't. The great question that it was brought up earlier in the show was brought up by a good caller just like yourself yesterday. That someone needs to be asked, what's a woman? Wouldn't that be a killer question for 2024? I can't believe someone got on the Supreme Court without having to answer that. I don't know. I'm not a biologist. Well, 4-year-olds can tell better than you. So that was not in there. Let me tell you what else wasn't in there. This should bother you. I hope this bothers you. But there was no questions about the Constitution. It's just the basis of our entire government. It's the foundation on which our entire American experiment is built. No questions on it. No questions about the general welfare clause. No questions on your interpretation of the necessary and proper clause. No real questions about how you're going to govern this country based on your interpretation of that document. What the hell is the point of a debate then? What are we supposed to do? Are we running for homecoming queen? Is that what we're running for? Are we running for prom queen? Are we trying to sit in the back of the limo on homecoming with your little white gloves on so you could wave to everybody else? Or are we trying to run the most important country in human history? Even if it wasn't the most important country in human history, can you imagine going and trying to get a job as a manager at McDonald's and they don't ask you about a hamburger? That's the same thing. No questions about the Constitution. In fact, the word Constitution doesn't even pop up in the debate, even in an answer. So when they're asked about all of these other questions, all of these other issues, they're asked about immigration, they're asked about the economy, they're asked about climate change, asked them about separating kids from their parents, all that. The word Constitution doesn't even come up in either one of the candidates' answers. There's one time, I went through the whole transcript. There was one time a variation of the word popped up, and it was in a question to J.D. Vance. It says, J.D. Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election, would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again to seek challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? That's the only time the combination of letters, Constitution, or anywhere in there, the base word is in there. So really, we didn't get to any insight into the candidates' thoughts on the Constitution? What are we, children? Can't we be a little more adult than this? I'm not saying we've got to make it all, as boring as C-SPAN, but can there be some substance in there? Something else that wasn't brought up. The one thing that is going to wreck this country above all else, the one thing that wrecks every empire in history, the deficit, the national debt. The only time the deficit was mentioned was when the moderators asked about there was a Wharton study that said the Trump economic plan would add like $5 trillion to the deficit over 10 years or whatever. J.D. Vance was asked twice about that. It was the follow-up because they didn't like his first answer. And so that's the only time the word deficit was brought up. The only time the word debt was really brought up. How do all empires implode eventually? The Spanish Armada didn't get beat by the English because the English all of a sudden got better at making boats. Is that the Spanish couldn't afford to keep it up. Same thing that happened to the Ottoman Empire. Same thing that happened to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't collapse because we beat it militarily on a battlefield. Soviet Union had an economic collapse. They couldn't afford their empire anymore. And that's what they all do. All countries get over their skis. All empires get over their skis with debt, and then they inflate their currency, and then they crash their economy, and then boom, dictator. No concern about that, though. No questions about Social Security. The trust fund for Social Security is going to run out in it's projected 7 years, so you can guess about 5 to 6 years from now. And when that happens, we're either going to tank the entire budget or we're going to have massive cuts to seniors, but it is going to rock this country like no other financial crisis has since the Great Depression. Very adult topic, not fun to talk about, not politically popular, didn't get a mention. But you know how many times the word abortion came up? Like the two words Social Security never come up. Constitution doesn't come up. But abortion, 16 times. No country has ever collapsed because they couldn't kill their fetuses fast enough. That's not what happened to the Byzantine Empire. That's not what happened to the Persians under Xerxes. That's not what happened to the Confederates in the Civil War. This is not how empires collapse. This is not how societies die off. Because they can't get abortions fast enough. But we have to talk about it 16 times that word has to come up. The other thing that I thought you would find interesting in my word search here. There was some talk about guns. Believe me, that gun come up. But check this out. You're only going to hear this from me because I'm the only psycho who did this. But the term gun control was never said. When guns came up, or when they were talking about gun control, they never said gun control. They said gun safety. They said gun violence. They said gun laws. They said gun legislation. But the word gun appears in the debate 24 times, but never once followed by control. What does that tell you? Tells you how unpopular the term gun control is. They're losing that argument. They're trying to find some new ways around it. 800-288-WBAP. Cleo in Plano, you're on the James Show. What do you think about the debate?
Hi, James. I thought it was ironic they never talked about getting rid of the filibuster because Kamala had mentioned she wanted to do that so they could easily bring back Roe versus Wade. And since they talked about abortion so much, I'm surprised that didn't come up.
Yeah, filibuster not in the transcript. That's a good observation. Cleo gets 7 points. Garrett, Plano, 7 points. Thank you, Cleo. Christy. Hey, Christy in Dallas. You're next up on WBAP. Your thoughts on the debate?
Not so much on the debate, but in regards, you were talking about their policies and their stance on the Constitution earlier. I think there should be just a blind ballot where both parties put out their policies and their stance on that, and that's how we vote. We don't know whose policies belong to who.
Ooh, how long would the ballot have to be for that?
Pretty long.
Okay,
just
so
the major point. I mean, there would be a lot of stuff missing, but just like the major points on like the big issues and some other minor issues.
See, I wish, but we would still be able to tell who is who when you go up there. Look, and think of how many voters go up there, and all they care about is abortions. They don't care how bad the Democrats infringe on your rights, or how bad how many businesses they shut down for a lockdown, or mask your kids, or how many wars they start, or debts, or whatever, inflation. They don't care. Can I still have my abortions? So people will go up there and they'll see that first question. They're pro-abortion, they're anti-abortion, and they'll know which one's the Democrat and the Republican already.
That is true. Yeah, you got a good point.
Yeah, I wish it didn't matter so much on personality and who's the person behind the platforms. That's a very mature thought, Christy. Too mature for democracy, though. That's one of the inherent downfalls of having a democratic system, period. That's why we have a constitutional representative republic instead of a pure democracy, because democracy can get pretty silly if left unchecked. All right, 800-288-9227 if you want to jump in on the James Show. Coming up next, Anthony Russo is going to recap the VP debate. And you're going to hear his walk-away story. He hasn't always held the political leanings he has now, and his conversion process, you're going to hear about that next. And also, I'm here to remind you that you have a chance to win a trip to Vegas from WBAP to go see the Scorpions at Planet Hollywood. I don't care if you like the Scorpions or not. You would still like to go on this trip. Text the word STILL, STILL, right now to 95819. STILL to 95819 to enter to win. Next clues coming 5 p.m. today, and they also have some hints coming up on the WBAP Morning Show. For a full list of contest rules, go to WBAP.com. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let's go. Is the sound off? All right, so the big VP debate was last night. I thought it was first do no harm success story for both candidates involved. They didn't hurt the top of the ticket. Of course, you and I are both just wildly disappointed about the things that were left out of the debate. You and I are both wildly disappointed that the moderators didn't ask some questions that could have really helped us understand what the heck's going on and who's doing what and who's responsible for anything. But other than that, this is kind of well within the lines of expectations. Let's ask my next guest, Anthony Russo, Truth Will Set You Free podcast. Anthony, your thoughts on last night's debate?
I mean, I was pleasantly surprised going into the debate. I love the applause. Going into the debate, I knew how powerful J.D. Vance was as a speaker. I've seen him on MSNBC. I've seen him on CNN. I've seen what he can do in enemy territory, and I knew he was going to be incredibly sharp. The one thing that definitely you could take away is for the side that's been just oddly calling him weird because of some weird reason to try to demonize the other side, I think the one thing that he definitely showed is not only is he brilliant and intelligent, and quick-witted and the ability to answer all policies, he's definitely not weird. So that was one huge positive for me. Across the board from a political standpoint, although I do not like Waltz, I think we got to see two gentlemen that were old school, treated politics like old school politicians, where they talked about the issues. They took subtle digs at each other's campaign, but nothing severe, and they treated each other like human beings. And I think that was the big takeaway I have, that the future of American politics is not dead, and that's something that we do see with Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, even Donald Trump. So I think there was a lot of positives to take from last night.
So tell me what's your beef with J.D. Vance?
I don't have any beef. Literally, when he was picked, I was like, I don't know if he's a great pick because they're going to be able to pick him apart and his previous issues and policies. But he nailed it. I mean, he took ownership. Honestly, last night, I'm already getting my bumper stickers ready for Vance 2028. To be
shut up. All right, that's a nice level of optimism. So, Anthony Russo, did I see a walkaway video from you from about 4 years ago or so? You want to explain your conversion?
Oh yeah, God, how did you find that? I walked away closer to 2012.
Wait, hang on. Does everybody know what we talk about when we say walk away? Garrett, do you know what it means when there's a walk away story? All right, so walk away is the people who are making that maturity from, when you're young and liberal to when you're older and conservative. And everyone has their story, and it's like a testimony for Christians, like what convinced you, or what first sparked your curiosity, or what first made you doubt your previous worldview. And I find these stories interesting because we're learning how to sort of speed this process up and get other people to go through this process. But go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, it's huge. So the walkaway movement, I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name that created it. He walked away from the Democrat
Brandon Straka.
Brandon Straka, thank you. And I've interviewed him before. Interesting story. But from my perspective, I was a lifelong Democrat. I was raised a Democrat. I was raised to believe Democrat ideals. And to be honest, if you look at today's Democrat Party, they're nothing of what I was raised on in terms of liberalism. Liberalism, to me, is not dead if you look at the Conservative Party, funny enough. They're the ones that believe in having an open mind. So around 2012, the big deciding factor, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and as I started to own my own business and I started to see the level of wokeism before the term woke was real, or used, I should say, I started to see that there was a massive issue. And the Michael Brown incident was my turning point, my tipping point, where I was like, this is just lunacy at this point, and the demonization of police, and seeing the hands up, don't shoot false narrative, realizing the media was no longer our friend and probably has not been for decades. And realize that I just believed a just pit of lies for too long. That was really why I started to make the switch over to the conservative movement and the Republican movement. And in all reality, I see that both sides of the political coin have major issues, but the conservative side is far ahead in terms of unity and bringing people together. And that's what I really recognized between 2012 and 2016 when I made my full switch.
I love hearing those stories. Round of applause, studio. Yeah, everyone loves hearing this. Now, I was never a registered Democrat, but coming out of college, I was like, what am I? I don't know. I was sort of up in the air. And the thing that steered me away from Team Blue was how many of their environmental predictions kept coming wrong, like every single one of them that I had ever heard in my entire life. Some of the ones that I heard from when I was a kid were already expiring. And then when you go back and read, you find out before I was born in the 60s and 70s, there were all kinds of predictions that were made for like the year 2000 that just never happened. And I started to think, well, maybe these people just don't know what they're talking about.
Al Gore almost became a billionaire off of that rhetoric. And not a single thing from The Inconvenient Truth, his movie, which I bought hook, line, and sinker back then. I literally am watching like, what a powerful movie. Not a single thing has come true. Not a single thing. So it's like if you're talking about follow the science, we're a country that is in belief that if you do your own research, you're clearly an idiot and clearly a moron. When in all reality, the people that do their own research that don't have the same degrees, that are not getting the same funding from God knows where, are actually more accurate than those that are profiteering hundreds of millions and different companies that are profiting billions of dollars off of pseudoscience and false realities. The climate's changing, but is it to the extent, no, that they say, and is it actually man-made? Who knows at this point? And they're literally using this hurricane against us as well. Like, obviously, people are becoming climate change believers now, the ones that live in Asheville. No, right now they're worried about rebuilding their homes or seeing if their neighbor is alive. I don't think they think that anything has to do with climate change except for a really horrific storm.
Tell them where they can find your work outside of WBAP, Anthony.
Truth Will Set You Free USA is a place to find me on all the social media networks, including the X.
Thanks for sharing your story. Love hearing it, bud.
Take it easy, brother.
Thank you. That's Anthony Russo. Truth Will Set You Free. All right, your thoughts. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. I have audio highlights from last night's VP debate, and your comments are definitely welcome. Bring them on. 800-288-9227. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome back to the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Your thoughts on last night's VP debate. Did it help? Did it hurt? My takeaway was the things missing from this debate. It's you've probably heard me on the last two debates make the same complaints, where it was Trump versus Kamala and Trump versus Biden. Scant mention of the Constitution, if any. There was really almost no mention of it at all at the debate last night. No mention of Social Security and the impending collapse there. No real talk about balancing the budget or the deficit or doing anything about the debt or all the real major issues that caused an empire to collapse. But we're kind of used to that now. The word abortion came up 16 times. Guns came up 24 times. Never gun control. But, you know, in all of our talk here, we haven't actually played any audio from the debate last night. We've been so busy talking to guests, talking to you. I've taken a lot of calls with people and their opinions. And so just feel free to jump in at any point. If something strikes your fancy and you want to put it on the James Show, 800-288-9227. All right, now some actual audio. I want to start with a clip from the moderators. Listen to how loaded the questions are. This one was about climate change, but it just comes with so many like presuppositions. And when we talk about bias, it's not just about cutting them off or doing fact checks. There's a lot of like little subtle bias that pops up when you're in an unfriendly environment like this.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
So it presupposes that there's legislation that can change the weather. And the whole question, before she even gets to the question took up like the last 4 seconds of that, 40-second soundbite. The first one was, look at all the destruction and death and mayhem caused by climate change. And then the second part of that was, all the scientists all agree that this is all about climate change. And then the last one was like, there's a survey that says most people all agree. So with the death, the scientists and public opinion all agreeing about climate change, what are you going to do about it? I mean, is that the most loaded question possible? The answer is yes. That is exactly the definition of a loaded question. Not do you think climate change is at fault? Not what's your explanation for those who think climate change is at fault? It just presupposes, of course, climate change is at fault. Scientists say, no, you say, because I can give you plenty of scientists that say they are not connected. There's no connection between what happened this weekend with the hurricane and what you call man-made catastrophic global warming. Tired of hearing this about hurricanes, too. That was something in the last segment or two. When I was talking to Anthony Russo. Like an inconvenient truth, Al Gore. That came out in 2006, and he was showing you this image of Hurricane Katrina is going to be more often and more frequent and more intense in the future because of climate change. And from the second he said that, God, in his beautiful sense of humor, said, oh, no, you don't. I can control that. And the United States went through its first decade. It was the first time we had 10 years in a row without a major hurricane, a category 3 or bigger, without a major hurricane making landfall in the United States, going back as far as we had records. And I don't mean satellite records in the 60s. I mean, going back in the 1800s. We have people wrote down, oh my goodness, a hurricane hit today. We know when hurricanes hit. We don't know about all the hurricanes that like floated off in the Atlantic, never to touch the land, but we're not really worried about those, are we? But not only was that prediction made in 2006 and turned out to not be true, we didn't have more frequent, intense hurricanes. We didn't have more category 3 hurricanes making landfall. We had none. And then here it is, almost 20 years after that failed prediction has fallen flat on its face, and she's still rolling with it like it's the generally accepted consensus. All scientists agree that we're going to have it. No, y'all said that in 2006 and you were wrong. You're still saying it now. Like it's a done deal. Like everyone should believe in it, even though there's no factual, even though it's really been disproven by what? Oh yeah, the real world. And then after all that, he gave his answer, and Tim Walz gave an answer, and then there was this odd climate change fact check at the end of the answer. Check this out.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
And then they switched topics. They just threw that in there. Yeah, the overwhelming consensus of scientists says you're wrong. Did she ever do that to Tim Walz? Did the overwhelming consensus of scientists say men can have a baby? Are these the same experts that said the Inflation Reduction Act would reduce inflation? Are these the same experts that said the Olympics opening ceremony was about Dionysus? Are these the same experts that said wearing a mask would help? Anyway. And this is the fun part about the debate. I hadn't even played anything from the candidates. I just played a couple of moderator clips. That's what a clown show it was. Also, moderators again, separating kids. Question 1.
Would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop.
Look, first off, the correct answer of that is, anybody who goes to jail necessarily get separated from their kids. I mean, that's what happens. We do that to Americans all the time, and you don't consider it, this is inhumane. This is a violation of their rights. We're separating families. You separate a family every time a criminal commits a crime and you punish them for it. Why is that a bad thing when these people do it? And the answer in the real world is, if you're deporting them, no, I don't want to separate them. The kids can go with them. How about we end birthright citizenship so we don't have this anomaly of a bunch of illegal immigrants with children that are citizens? Nah, that's not what they want to hear. In fact, they didn't get the answer they wanted. So they circled back and asked him again after his answer and Tim Walz's answer. It's like, what the heck? Y'all are really on this separating kids thing.
Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill. She'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point.
They asked him that question twice. They asked him, you guys are really stuck on that. Y'all don't have any time to ask a question about the Constitution, about balancing the budget, what you're going to do about Social Security that's about 5-6 years away from collapse. But you got time to ask time and again about separating kids. It sounds like you just want to make J.D. Vance look bad. And then we did J.D. Vance had to do the fact check to I don't have time to play that, but you probably heard that. They fact check him on fact check all those people from Haiti and Ohio are legal. He's like, yeah, but they're not really. He fact checked them. They're fact checked. No, fact check. They're not going through the legal immigration process. They came here illegally. They fill out a form on an app, and now they are deemed to have legal status just because the Biden administration waved an executive order in the air and said the rules are changed. So that's a little bit of a summary. We'll continue with some of this coming up next. Your thoughts are welcome. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Now, we are just 34 days away from the next election. And I think we're going to run out the clock here. And this could be the last time we have these two campaigns squaring off in a touchstone of exchange of ideas of any time. Is this going to be enough? Should there be another debate? 800-288-9227. This is the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let's go. Yeah, one of the reasons you like this show is because I play you the other audio. I don't just pull the same clips and highlights that everyone else is playing and run them. Because I know you want to hear the knucklehead. I know you want to hear I knew a shooter.
I've become friends with school shooters, and I'm a knucklehead at times.
That is funny when you play it back to back. I know you heard that from everyone else. I know Bongino played it. I know you're probably going to hear it on Levin next. So I was just playing you some of the other stuff from the vice presidential debate. So if you listen to the whole, if you all day listeners, I hope you feel like you get the whole like Golden Corral buffet of news, and I've added a little bit to that. My next guest is with the New York Post Swingers team, Victoria Churchill, back on the James Show. I'm sure you watched the vice presidential debate last night, but you've been on the ground in swing states. How do you think this resonated with the undecided voters?
Well, thanks so much for having me back on, James. Always a pleasure to join you to chat everything that's going on in this crazy, crazy presidential election we're covering and living through. But look, honestly, I think that really in swing states, I don't really think this moved the needle. I saw a Venn diagram, or I guess what was supposed to be a Venn diagram floating around social media in the past, 24 hours or so. And it was, undecided voters on one side, and the other side was people that watched the vice presidential debate, and there was no overlap. And I think that just really goes to illustrate that obviously this wasn't as well watched as the presidential debate. So I think it's really just the people that are in tune with politics already that tuned in. I do think Vance did better, obviously, as you previewed just in the little bit that I've been listening to. Walz has had a lot more explaining to do, and I think somebody has said in history that, right, like if you're explaining, you're losing. And I think this really holds true when we look at the performance from the debate yesterday.
Well, I'm watching CNN right now. They haven't said a whole lot about the VP debate. If Walz did good or Vance put his foot in his mouth, that would be their top headline. But their top headline today, Victoria, is Special Counsel Jack Smith has never before seen evidence from Donald Trump, some other case. It's like, oh, well, I guess they lost because they're not going to spend all day saying J.D. Vance did better.
Exactly. And I mean, look, it's been shocking, really, the headlines from even places like CNN. They had their voter kind of focus groups and things after the debate saying they thought Vance, either did well or overperformed. Same even with folks like the New York Times saying, Vance did a great job defending the MAGA agenda. Again, I think that really goes to show that these people, that if they had a bone to pick with J.D. Vance's performance, they would have found it, and they did not find one.
Well, one of the interesting parts about your specific reporting, focusing on the toss-up states, the swing states, is that since you and I have started talking, North Carolina has moved from leans Republican to a toss-up state. Is the aftermath of this hurricane and, of course, the devastation that followed it, is that going to maybe push them back into leans red? Are they unhappy with Team Blue after the hurricane response?
It's interesting. I've actually been debating this in my own head over the past few days. I think there's a couple things that we look at, right? So on one hand is just, the response. It's been slow, specifically from the federal government. There's been talks that to really authorize the FEMA dollars and the federal emergency dollars to the extent that they should be, that would actually take an act of Congress instead of the president. There's been really, personally, I think a little bit like kind of gross talk in D.C. about tying it to some funding packages that they need to do for the end of the year. And it's like, why are we doing this? Why are we politicizing this tragedy? So, that's kind of one side of it. The other side of it is just like, we talk a lot about the methods of voting and the way that people actually get to the polls. I am very interested in knowing what kind of infrastructure is going to exist in those affected areas. Obviously, Western North Carolina tends to lean a lot more to the Republican side, but some of the hardest hit areas, like the city of Asheville itself, are more liberal. And so, are those just votes lost? Are people going to, vote by mail? North Carolina, that's been something else that I believe I've talked on your show about. North Carolina was supposed to have ballots out the middle of September. Those got delayed because RFK Jr. took his name off the ballot. They had to be reprinted. So that's been a whole kerfuffle that basically the method of voting in North Carolina has already been screwed up. I think this is going to do that to a higher extent. Obviously, that's another part of it. And then the other side of it is, if people have lost their houses, their jobs, their businesses, are they even going to remember to vote? Or again, are they seeing the response from different levels of government and saying, this government is doing nothing for me. I have to let them know that I'm paying attention. So I think there's really a lot of factors at play that go kind of outside of just day-to-day political science, if you will.
Do we have an explanation on why Asheville is so blue and an otherwise sea of red? Is there a big college there or something?
Not in Asheville itself. Actually, it's quite interesting. I actually went on vacation there earlier this year, so I've just seen like places just down the road from where I was staying the week that I was there. But it's just kind of one of these like hippy dippy towns. to me, culturally, it actually did feel a lot like the town where I went to college, Lawrence, Kansas. It's just kind of this blue dot, but like I said, obviously Lawrence is a college town. Asheville itself isn't to that extent. There are colleges in the area. Western Carolina University is kind of the biggest one in that area.
Yeah, so
as well as UNC Asheville, but it's not really
right. Well, but we have one of those
college town.
We have one of those blue dots here in Texas. Austin is a little slice of California, but we can explain it. It's a seat of government, so it has thousands of politicians who are, they just happen to be a little more pro-government. And then the largest or second largest university in Texas, the University of Texas at Austin, is there. So all the faculty, all the recent, PhDs and graduate students and all that, they kind of skew it blue. So we have an excuse there. But Ashland, North Carolina, they may not be blue much longer. Victoria Churchill, how do they find your work outside of WBAP?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. Look up our work, New York Post. If you go on kind of the top headlines, you go on the news section, scroll down a little bit, and you'll find an entire category of just swing state coverage. So check out the work that myself and lots of other great folks on my team across the country are doing. We're in all the key states. Me, myself, personally, I'm spending time in Pennsylvania, North Carolina. Pennsylvania is actually another one to watch if you guys are tuning in. Look at the Pennsylvania Senate debate. That's tomorrow. That's going to be huge. Just keep up with everything else we're doing. Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. We're making sure we're on the ground in all those states.
All right. Well, I'm not watching the Pennsylvania Senate debate, but the rest of that sounded like a good recommendation. Thank you very much, Victoria Churchill from the New York Post Swing State reporting team. Your thoughts next, 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. Climate change came up in last night's debate. Also, it keeps floating up in these news items around the hurricane and the relief. Let's talk about that next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey. Hey, welcome to The James Show. Don't say nothing, Garrett. I don't need your comments. I know I can't sing. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Welcome to the big show, 800-288-9227. If you want to chime in, one of the topics that came up at the vice presidential debate last night, of course, climate change. I played this a little earlier, but that was like an hour or so ago. Just to recap, just look how loaded the question is. The first time they brought up climate change to J.D. Vance.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
Let's talk about that. She said some things in there. Scientists say, why'd you have to add that in there? Why do you have to add qualifiers in there? Because if she comes out and says hurricanes are more intense and more frequent, well, she could easily be disproven because they're not. In fact, we just came out of, it's weird. Hurricanes are fairly normal. One hits this country almost every year. In fact, a major hurricane hits this country pretty much every year. And when I say major, I mean the definition of that, category 3 or above. It's rare that we don't have a major hurricane hit in a year and for, a hurricane season. After Hurricane Katrina, after that year, because there was Rita after that, you realize we went 10 years for the first time in recorded American meteorological history. First time we went 10 years without a major hurricane hitting America. Now, we had a wild spike of hurricanes, and I think it was 2019. But overall, the pattern does not show that we are having more hurricanes and more intense hurricanes. So she has to put a qualifier on it. Scientists say. Top scientists say. Well, they're not the top scientists if they're wrong. Who are the scientists saying the opposite? Because they're now the top scientists. Because whoever said that was lying to you. That's what Al Gore said in his 2006 movie, Inconvenient Truth. Turned out to be wrong. Now, how many predictions can be made like this until this goes away? This was one of the things that drove me away from Team Blue in my youth. is I read about the Silent Spring. I read about the population bomb, Rachel Carlson, Paul Ehrlichman, where they were predicting by the year 2000. Because remember, I graduated in the 90s, so I was in college in the late 90s, looking all this stuff up. And they were saying by the year 2000, there's going to be famine. 100 million people are going to starve. It's going to be pandemonium, cats and dogs living together, people farting in elevators. It was going to be terrible. Now, this was stuff that was said in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. So these weren't predictions from like 100 years ago. These were predictions where they were about to pass and not come true. And so that really pushed me away from it. Clearly, these experts don't know what they're talking about. So in the future, when they're like, well, we've got 500 days or we've got 12 years or we've got to do electric cars, I never bought into it. And we've done nothing but pass these milestones. You realize in Al Gore's documentary, we weren't supposed to have snows on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro anymore. Still there. We weren't supposed to have glaciers at Glacier National Park in Montana. Still there. Bigger than when the movie came out, actually. We weren't supposed to have a polar ice cap on the North Pole. Bigger than when the movie came out. So not only are they wrong, they're wrong in the other direction. You were warned about polar bears. There's an animation of a polar bear floating away on an ice floe in Al Gore's movie. Polar bear population's higher than when the movie came out. Like, not only are they wrong, like, well, we were off by like 12%. You're off in the wrong direction. You're off by like negative 100%. And so the truth is slowly getting out there. But there's a guy named Bjorn Lomborg. He is a climate scientist who, if you haven't heard of him, it's because they try and act like he's not part of the mainstream of science. He's not one of the experts, the top experts. He's not quoted by the moderators during the debate. That's for damn sure. But 2 weeks ago, he was on Bill Maher saying something that I've said on the James Show. Remember all that complaint about, oh, the Great Coral Reef's going away. It's being bleached. It's falling apart. It's bigger now than when they said that. You realize that, right?
I'm going to show you some of the data that actually indicates this is a problem, but it's not the end of the world by any means. So there's two of the world's leading climate economists. One is Richard Tull, one of the most quoted climate economists from this year, and the other one is William Nordhaus, the guy who got the only Nobel Prize in climate economics. They both made estimates across all the different estimates of how bad is climate change going to be. By the end of the century, at a 3 degrees centigrade or 5.4 degree Fahrenheit temperature rise, the cost is going to be somewhere between 2 and 3% of GDP.
But what will the ocean look like? I mean, I'm not talking about oceans rising. I'm talking about oceans dying. And the world can't live without dead oceans. And it seems like they're in bad shape between all the plastic in them. They're overfished. I mean, there's many places have no fish left at all. They're too acidic. Coral reefs, I know you've talked about, oh, that's exaggerated. Tell me about why you think the coral reef problem is exaggerated.
That's just the data. So can I just finish the other point I was trying to make before we go on to the coral reefs? So 2 to 3% of global GDP is a problem. But remember, by the end of the century, the UN estimate the average person on the planet will be 450% as rich as he or she is today. So that means instead of being 450% as rich, we will feel like we're only 435% as rich. Yes, that's a problem. No, it's not the end of the world. On the coral reef bit.
Rich.
So
how does rich fix the ocean?
No. So on the coral reefs bit, we have a situation where we have on Great Barrier Reef, so the world's biggest coral reef, the Australian Marine Scientific Institute, sorry, I can't remember what they're called, but they're the guys who do the data every year on the coral reef since 1986. And they have been assessing what is the total outcome of how good does the reef look like. And in 2009 to 2012, we thought it was terrible. It was really dramatic. The Guardian wrote the obituary for the Great Coral Reef.
I know.
And the point I've just been making is the last 3 years, they've been at the highest level, the most coral reef we've ever seen in those areas. And so the point is not that there's not a challenge for coral reefs. There is. But most of the challenge comes from overfishing, from industrial pollution, from sea runoff. And those are the kinds of things that we should fix. But we're not being well informed if we're being told this is because of climate change, so we got to change our...
All right. Enough of that. You get it, though? I have a feeling that hoax is going to collapse. And when it does, think of everything that's going to collapse along with it. All this push for electric vehicles, all this push for windmills, all this push for solar panels, for cafe standards, for plastic straws, anything that's anti-oil in nature has to go away. I can't wait for this whole hoax to fall apart, because then they're going to have to come up with some other excuse on why the people in government should own and control the means of production, because we know that's what this is all really about. Coming up next, is Taylor Swift and her being political, is that finally hurting her popularity, or is it just turning off people who weren't her fans to begin with? We'll talk about that next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.